In this chapter, our learning objectives are to describe the juvenile court's jurisdiction, explain delinquency status offenses, and compare how states define a juvenile. We will identify and define terms used in juvenile justice, review the 3 major steps of the juvenile justice process, and describe the 5 discussion points. We will also discuss the differences between the juvenile and criminal justice systems. The system of agencies that is designed to handle juvenile offenders is the juvenile justice system. Parens patriae is the legal doctrine that translates to the state as the parent. At the same time, there may be more definitions for jurisdiction depending on the context, as it is used for juvenile justice. It is the authority granted to hear a case. In other words, the juvenile justice system has jurisdiction over those 6 to 17 in North Carolina. Delinquency is defined as behavior prohibited by law or things that are required in your specific state. An example is truancy. A status offense is an act of delinquency committed by a juvenile that would not be considered a crime if committed by an adult, for example. Violating curfew, incorrigibility or ungovernability, illegally purchasing alcohol, and underage consumption of alcohol. So when we define juvenile, it's an individual who falls within an age range that gives jurisdiction to the juvenile justice system in North Carolina, ranging from age 6 through a maximum age of 17. At the same time, the criminal justice system manages those over the age of 18. This illustrates that North Carolina has the lowest age at which a 6-year-old can be adjudicated. This table compares and contrasts the juvenile and criminal justice systems. When the criminal justice system discusses convictions, we call them adjudicated delinquent. When you hear the term trial, you think of adjudication hearing parole, which we call aftercare. If you're sentenced, we call it a commitment. If it's considered a crime, we call it a delinquent act. As we continue comparing and contrasting criminals' equivalents, delinquency is a term for imprisonment in jail, which is a detention center, disposition versus a sentence. As discussed, a disposition hearing is considered a sentencing hearing in adult court. An institution is a facility designed for long-term care for juveniles. A document that states the allegations against a juvenile is called a petition, and while we arrest adults, we take juveniles into custody. When we refer youths to juvenile court, we call it a petition. The 2 main sources of petitions are law enforcement agencies or parents, victim schools, and probation officers. We often use diversion, which removes the juvenile from the juvenile justice process and provides rehabilitation services or treatments. If we don't use diversion, the juvenile goes to intake, where court staff decide whether or not to process the case further. There are some options when adjudicating youth. Some informal handling involves repaying the victims or victim restitution, a set number of hours of volunteer work, which we call community service, or informal probation, where the juvenile agrees to meet certain requirements in exchange for dismissing the case. In some cases, they waiver to adult courts. It's the process in which the juvenile court gives jurisdiction to the adult court. As we discussed, a juvenile court judge's decision to find that the juvenile committed the delinquent act is an adjudication in adult court, and we would call that a conviction. Disposition is equivalent to sentencing in criminal cases. Most of us know that probation allows someone to remain in the community under certain conditions. Residential placement is another tool that the juvenile justice system uses. It can place the youth in a juvenile institution, camp, ranch, or group home. We can compare the juvenile justice system and the criminal justice system. We can still change the youth's behavior while the criminal justice system seeks to punish the offender, and that general deterrence works. For juvenile justice, we use prevention activities to model behavior and reduce the risk, while the criminal justice system aims at deterrence. Programs are often used to divert youth away from institutions. Most juvenile proceedings are made private or partially redacted from the public record. However, while criminal justice uses discretion in plea bargaining, the record is public. The Juvenile Justice Department decides which cases to file. In criminal justice, plea bargaining is common. When filing a petition, court action is based on social and legal factors. Prosecution decisions use legal facts. Discretion can be used in both courts. Not all juveniles in the juvenile justice system are delinquents. Occasionally, they're detained for their protection, and it's typically required to separate youths from adults. A right applied to adults is being able to bail or bond out before the court date. The juvenile justice system follows a more civil and confidential process, and the juveniles do not have the right to a jury trial. In criminal justice, the proceedings are open, and the defendants have the right to a trial by jury. The need to protect the public from offenders is similar. Rehabilitation versus punishment that fits the crime is in contrast. The juvenile justice system uses more community-based and residential services, and orders are typically directed to people other than the offender. Examples are parents or guardians, including rehabilitation home staff. When we discuss aftercare and parole, we're looking to reintroduce these people to the commute for juvenile justice, which combines surveillance and reintegration criminal justice. The primary purpose is to surveil and report illicit behavior. Some assumptions we operate with are the need to protect the community, hold people accountable, and ensure we do not violate constitutional rights. In juvenile justice, We use an educational approach to change specific behaviors. Law enforcement deals with juveniles and adults and spends much of its time on juvenile justice issues. The majority of this involves proactive approaches and community policing strategies, but occasionally, law enforcement does need to take juveniles into custody for their criminal behavior. Probable cause must be established for juvenile or adult intake or prosecution. In both cases, the accused may be held in custody to ensure their appearance in court. Alternatives like the bail or bond process or electric detention devices may be used. Adjudication and convictions, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is required. Both have the right to an attorney to confront witnesses or to remain silent, but juveniles do not have the right to a trial by jury. In both cases, the decision can be appealed to a higher court. Many decision-making processes involve the current offense, history, and social factors, and holding the offenders accountable. Victim considerations are not allowed in both courts' decision-making. Thank you for taking the time to watch the webinar. Please ensure you add a comment to be counted as present for this week's attendance.